Hi everyone, welcome back. Video 15 in the Cold War. And this one, ladies and gentlemen, it's all about this man here, Mikhail Gorbachev. Can you see that there? The hammer and the sickle, the symbol of the Communist Party. Similar to my hat there. Can you see it? The hammer and the sickle, the symbols of the Communist Party. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Mikhail Gorbachev had a huge impact on the Communist Party in the Soviet Union from 1985 onwards. So, what did he do? Well, let's have a look. Can you remember anything about him? I hope you can. Again, if you can't, get your pen, get your paper, make some notes. Here we go. Mikhail Gorbachev. Now, if you remember our previous video, I was talking about the Second Cold War. President Reagan was president of the USA. He hated communism. He referred to it as the evil empire. Do you remember Star Wars, this idea of his of putting weapons in space? Yes, hopefully you do. So, Gorbachev, Gorby as he became known in the West. Mikhail Gorbachev became the leader of the Soviet Union, the General Secretary of the Communist Party, 1985. Wow, he had a big job. USSR was in a complete mess, ladies and gentlemen. Why? As ever, money was at the center of it all. Can you remember 1979, Christmas Day? What had the Soviet Union done? Invaded Afghanistan. A very, very costly war. They were still there, still paying out money. The Second Cold War. If you remember, President Reagan spent billions and billions of dollars. Could the USSR catch up? Could they afford to spend that? The economy of the Soviet Union was not doing very well in 1985. The quality of goods were poor. People were queuing up for basics like food. The standard of living had declined. Quality of life for the citizens of the Soviet Union was not good. Farming was inefficient. USSR had to import thousands of tons of grain from its biggest enemy, the USA. Ladies and gentlemen, Gorbachev realized this. He realized something had to change. But what? He changed the system of the Cold War. Gorbachev was a turning point, possibly the key turning point towards the end of the Cold War. Now, there are three main things you need to know. Before I get to the three, here's something that's important. Gorbachev wanted to change, reform, modernize communism, the Communist Party, but he didn't want to get rid of it. He just wanted it to work better for the people of the Soviet Union. Please make a note of that. Gorbachev did not want to get rid of communism. We'll see what happens. Now, his three main ideas. Sometimes it's referred to as Gorbachev's new thinking. Well, the first one. He wanted to change the Communist Party. Here's two Russian words for you. Glasnost and perestroika. I'll talk about them in a minute. Changing the Communist Party. First one. Second one, he wanted to change, possibly end the arms race. That involved discussions with America. And the third one, he wanted to change the way the USSR dealt with other foreign countries, particularly in Eastern Europe. Remember the Brezhnev Doctrine? I hope you do. Brezhnev said USSR had the right to interfere and make those communist countries remain communist, remember? Brezhnev doctrine. Gorbachev says, I'm going to replace the Brezhnev doctrine with something called the Sinatra doctrine. I'll get to those in a minute. So there's the three things. Let's have a look at the first one. Now, he wanted to change the way the communist system worked in the USSR. First one, make things more efficient. Perestroika, what does it mean? In our words, we would say a restructuring, reforming, altering. He wanted to restructure the way the economy worked, not have it controlled by the government in the centre. No, give freedom, give initiative, give incentives to the business people. Let them make the decisions. He wanted more trade with the West and America, Western Europe and America. Well, they're not going to really trade with him if he's threatening them with missiles. Have a think. So, perestroika was a vital new idea because Gorbachev says, if we do this, communism will work better, the people will be happier, they will say, well done, the communists. That was his idea. The second word, Glasnost. In our words today, we would say that means being more open, openness. Communist rule was very secretive. Power was concentrated in the hands of a few. They did not share things with the whole general public. It led to corruption, and USSR had been very corrupt. But no, Gorbachev says, look, we need to be totally different. We need to have freedom of speech. We need to stop censorship. We need to be more relaxed. We need to let people criticize us. I'm going to release thousands of people who are in prison, put there by the communists because they criticized communism. No, he says, let's be more open. Now, that was very popular. But it was a two-edged sword for Gorbachev. One side, one edge of the sword, well done, Gorbachev. You have made things more open. You have allowed us to criticize you. Thank you. Good for Gorbachev. But turn it over, ladies and gentlemen, the other side of the sword. Once you've said to people, oh, feel free to criticize us, well, maybe they'll carry on criticizing and carry on. And where will that end up? We'll find out soon. So that's his first idea. Restructure, perestroika, open, Glasnost. That was Gorbachev's first step. His second step, relations with America, the Cold War. Remember, Reagan had made relations far worse. Gorbachev realized it's all to do with money. Gorbachev realized we can't possibly compete with America. We haven't got the money to keep on building more and more weapons. It'd be much better if I could use the money we've got to rebuild our economy so that people's lives would get better. So, at first, he didn't like Reagan, but gradually they had more and more meetings. He met him at Geneva in 1985, and that's the first step. They said they both wanted to make the world a safer place. That's a good start. They met in Reykjavik in 1986. Things didn't quite go so well there because Reagan was insistent on keeping Star Wars. But a third meeting, 1987, a big step forward, very, very significant. Because here we get what is called the INF Treaty. In an exam, just refer to it as INF. What it actually means are Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty. missiles that could travel a few hundred miles, not the real long-range stuff, mid-range. But they get together and they say, right, we are going to actually get rid of some of the missiles we've already got. This was hugely significant. It was the first time in the Cold War that the country said, look, we're going to actually get rid of stuff we've already got. If you think back to some of the previous treaties, SALT I, they were good, but they said, look, we're going to keep what we've already got and we're going to limit what we're going to get in the future. Good, but not as good as this. The INF Treaty actually cut the number of weapons in the world. And over the next few years, America got rid of about 800 and USSR got rid of 2,700 almost. And each side could send inspectors in to check that this was happening. This was the Cold War coming all the way down. Tension is being lowered. This was due to Gorbachev. Why did he do it? Well, you should have an idea by now. Money. He realized the Soviet economy couldn't compete. He realized he'd be better spending his money on the economy rather than weapons. He believed Reagan when President Reagan said, look, USA is not going to invade USSR. Gorbachev believed him. So then he thought, well, we don't need all those weapons because they're not going to invade us. And if I create a good impression with Reagan, that will help with the trade and the economy will improve, which is what I want. So that's why the INF Treaty was signed by Gorbachev. Why did Reagan sign it? We know that Reagan hated the communists, so why did he sign it? Well, he also realized stuff like Star Wars, SDI was unbelievably expensive. If, because of Gorbachev, it wasn't necessary, great, Reagan won't spend that money. He'll spend it on America doing something else. Also, Gorbachev, as I've mentioned, was very popular. He went and visited countries in Western Europe. He actually came to Britain. He met with our Prime Minister at the time. Now, 1980s. Anybody know who our Prime Minister was? Give yourself a bonus of 3 if you said Margaret Thatcher. Now, Thatcher, she became Prime Minister in 1979. She was a very close friend and ally of President Reagan. She agreed with him. But when she met Gorbachev, 1984, I think, after the meeting, she said, I like Mr. Gorbachev. We can do business together. So people like Thatcher are saying to Reagan, look, this man, we can work together with him. Maybe the Cold War can be ended. So Reagan also begins to change his approach because of Gorbachev. He carries on. Gorbachev does even more. In 1988, he announces to the world, look, I'm going to withdraw all of the Soviet troops from Afghanistan. They went in 79. 1988, he says, no, we're going to come out of Afghanistan. Of course, money. But it looks good. Gorbachev is saying to the world, look, we're making an effort. Do business with us. Good for relations, particularly with America. He also said, right, if we're not going to be invading countries like Afghanistan, we don't need as many troops. So I'm going to cut the number of troops in our armed forces. Again, good for money, but good for relations with America. So that's the second of Gorbachev's great ideas. Better relations with America, beginning to end the Cold War. The third and the final one, this thing of the Sinatra Doctrine. What's that all about? Well, Gorbachev looked around and he said, one of our previous leaders, Brezhnev, Mr. Eyebrows, if you remember, he'd said USSR had the right to go and invade and force other countries in Eastern Europe to be communist. That's not the way for Gorbachev. He rejected the Brezhnev doctrine, and he actually did it in a speech to the United Nations. So it was a completely out there, open to the world, Glasnost, openness. He's saying, look, I'm going to give countries freedom of choice. I've started back in the Soviet Union to give people freedom of choice. Now I'm going to give it to the countries of Eastern Europe. Well, that's a change. 1988. And then 1989, the very next year, Gorbachev's foreign spokesman, a man called Gerasimov, on American television. He's actually speaking in America. And he says basically, look, all of those countries that have been in the Warsaw Pact, we are giving them the freedom of choice. And because he was in America, he used a very, very famous American singer, a man called Frank Sinatra. Now, Frank Sinatra was regarded as one of the best singers ever. He had a very, very famous song called My Way. And more, much more than this, I did it my way. Sorry about that. But Gorbachev is saying to these countries in Eastern Europe, I'm giving you the freedom and you can choose to do it your way. You do not have to choose communism. Wow. That was a big step forward. So, what would those countries do? Wait for the next video and I'll tell you what happened next in the thrilling installment of the life of Mikhail Gorbachev, communist leader of USSR from 1985 to, that'd be giving it away. Speak to you soon. All the best.